Imagine for a second that you have just arrived at the proverbial gates of heaven.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. You're standing there and you're looking back on a life where you spent your time doing everything right.
Yeah, like you've got an absolute mountain of charity work under your belt.
Exactly. You were impeccably devout. You were
Yeah.
constantly putting others before yourself.
Like volunteering every weekend?
Yes, like you even spent decades building up your local community center.
Wow. A saint, basically.
Basically a saint.
Oh.
You are armed with this whole lifetime of good deeds, human connection, and religious practice. And then the gates open, and a voice tells you that absolutely none of it matters.
Oh, wow. Just zero credit for any of it.
Zero.
Yeah.
Your spiritual scoreboard has just been wiped completely clean.
That's just a radical premise.
It really is. And that premise is the foundation of a new philosophical translation that we are exploring today on this deep dive.
Right, because it argues that your charity might actually be an illusion.
Yeah, that your religion is largely useless, and that your only real path to heaven requires abandoning almost everything that makes you feel fundamentally human.
It is an incredibly jarring thought experiment to sit with. I mean, we are so deeply conditioned to expect a reward.
Oh, totally. Across almost all global cultures, we believe in this, like, cosmic ledger.
Right. We expect the universe to keep track of our debits and credits, punishing our selfish acts and rewarding our sacrifices.
But today, we are unpacking a translated 2024 philosophical text titled The Road to Heaven.
Authored by Diaforum Buddha, right?
Yes, exactly. And translated by Quino. Our goal today is to examine this text's highly specific framework for what heaven actually is.
And what it takes to get there, which is not what you'd expect.
Not at all. And before we get too deep into the weeds, as we dig into these translated writings today, it is really vital to establish that we are acting purely as impartial guides.
Definitely. We aren't endorsing this theology.
No, not taking a position on its validity either.
We're simply exploring the worldview contained within the text because, well, it is just such a fascinating, disruptive departure from conventional thought.
Disruption is the perfect word for it. Okay, let's unpack this. The text begins with a massive, comprehensive dismantling of earthly metrics.
Yeah, the author methodically lists out the things that human beings traditionally value.
And then just declares them totally void in this specific spiritual context. I mean, we're talking about social status, power,
wealth, and even just plain ability.
Right. The text even throws out things we usually consider universally positive.
Like what?
Like wisdom, knowledge, education, and reputation.
Wow.
It explicitly states that who your parents were or what great achievements you've made in human society do not count toward entry.
What's fascinating here is to understand why the author rejects these, we have to look at the mechanism of human achievement.
The mechanism? What do you mean?
Well, think about climbing the corporate ladder or gaining academic prestige or, building a stellar reputation.
Right. Those all take effort.
Yeah. They take effort, sure, but they all require a reliance on the physical world. And more importantly, a reliance on comparison.
Oh, I see. You're wealthy compared to someone else.
Exactly. You are educated compared to someone else.
So it's relative.
Right. The text suggests that these metrics are deeply tied to the human ego.
And therefore, they just have no currency in a realm that operates entirely without ego.
Exactly.
Honestly, it's like studying your whole life for a massive final exam.
Yeah.
And then you show up and you realize the grading rubric doesn't care about your homework, your attendance, or even if you read the textbook.
It's just a completely different test.
It really is. I mean, I can follow the logic on discarding wealth or social status, but the text doesn't stop at societal achievements.
No, it goes much further.
It explicitly dismisses traditional religious actions as well.
This is where it gets really wild.
Right. The author states that it doesn't matter what religion, political party, or group you joined. It doesn't matter how many churches, temples, or mosques you've built.
Which is usually the golden ticket in most traditions.
Totally. It even says it doesn't matter how many incense sticks you burned.
The underlying logic here is that, well, building a temple or burning incense is still a physical, earthly action.
And it's often transactional, right?
Exactly. The text implies that people frequently perform these rituals with the expectation of a spiritual payout.
Like they're buying a ticket.
Yeah, trying to buy a ticket to heaven with physical currency.
That makes sense, in a way.
But the author even goes so far to say that enduring suffering, enjoying bliss, spreading the teachings of gods, and whether you are devout or not, do not factor into the equation.
Okay, wait, I have to pause on that one.
I know, it's a lot.
The idea that being devout doesn't matter for getting into heaven feels completely contradictory to, well, everything.
It's definitely a shock to the system.
And the text even states that saving lives doesn't matter.
Yeah, physical lives.
If we throw out the rituals, the beliefs, the charity, and the actual saving of human lives, what is left?
It's a great question.
I mean, if standard morality is just thrown out, it fundamentally breaks our entire understanding of what constitutes a good life.
Well, the text replaces that entire complex web of morality with one single, uncompromising standard.
One span.
Just one. The author states that whether one can go to heaven has only one metric. Your quality of life must match the quality of life in heaven.
And the text defines that quality of life in heaven as a state of complete, unadulterated unselfishness and selflessness.
Right. That is the sole requirement.
It's just that. Unselfishness and selflessness.
It shifts the entire paradigm from what have you done to what is your fundamental internal nature.
It's less of an audit and more of an alignment?
Exactly. The mechanism at play here is essentially resonance. Think of it like tuning a radio.
Okay, radio dial.
Right. Heaven broadcasts at a very specific frequency, the frequency of pure, egoless selflessness.
So you have to match the station.
Yes. If your internal state resonates at that exact same frequency, you are drawn in.
And if you don't?
If you are broadcasting a frequency of ego, ambition, or earthly attachment, you simply cannot pick up the signal. You just don't match.
I have to push back here, though.
Okay, go for it.
Because this brings up a massive philosophical loophole. If resonance is the only metric, what happens if someone lives as a completely terrible person?
Like who?
Say, a violent criminal who causes immense suffering for 50 years, but somehow, miraculously, achieves this pure state of selflessness 5 minutes before they die.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Does this text really suggest they'd go to heaven, while a lifelong philanthropist who still has a tiny bit of human ego does not?
It's a tough pill to swallow.
Because that completely violates basic human justice. How does the author reconcile that?
Well, the text reconciles it by completely separating human justice from spiritual physics.
Spiritual physics, that's an interesting way to phrase it.
Yeah, according to the source material, your hypothetical criminal would indeed go to heaven.
Wow.
Really. The timeline of your life and the historical record of your actions become entirely irrelevant once that specific state of being is achieved.
So the past is just erased.
The text explicitly says that once a person achieves unselfishness and selflessness, they are the life needed by heaven.
No matter when or how they die.
Exactly. The author actually lists various causes of death to emphasize this very point.
Like what?
Whether you die from natural causes, illness, starvation, burning, a collision, being entrapped, or even murder.
So the method of death is totally meaningless.
Right. The physical trauma is just the breaking of the biological vessel.
Vessel being your body.
Exactly. If the internal frequency matches heaven at the moment of that break, the past history of the vessel is spiritually meaningless.
Wow. If you're listening to this, I mean, really let that sink in.
It's a heavy concept.
We usually judge a life as a complete narrative arc. You know, its length, its struggles, its moral consistency.
A whole story.
Right. But this philosophy says the narrative is just noise.
Total noise.
The physical world is just a waiting room. And the only thing that matters is the shape you've molded your consciousness into before your name is called.
But, this is a big but, molding that consciousness into a state of complete selflessness is far more complicated than simply deciding to be nice.
I assume it's not just holding the door open for people.
Not at all. In fact, the text argues that trying to be a savior, or being altruistic in the traditional sense, is often a trap.
A trap.
Yeah, a trap that actively prevents you from reaching heaven.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if I'm not supposed to help others to get into heaven, what am I supposed to do when I see someone suffering?
The author directly addresses the thought, quote, I want to liberate all beings, and responds by saying that no beings need you to liberate them.
None of them.
None. The author says you are only liberating yourself.
It attacks the savior complex at its absolute root.
Completely. The text argues that the desire to save others is fundamentally an illusion driven by the ego.
So you're helping others because it makes you feel righteous.
Right. Or because it aligns with your personal definition of what a good world should look like.
You know, this reminds me of that story about seeing a caterpillar struggling to break out of its cocoon.
Oh, I think I know this one.
Yeah. The immediate human impulse, right, the compassionate impulse, is to take a tiny pair of scissors, cut the cocoon open, and save the creature from suffering.
Because it looks like it's in pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But biologists will tell you that doing that actually cripples the butterfly.
Because it needs the struggle.
Right. The struggle of pushing through the cocoon is what forces fluid into its wings so it can fly.
By saving it, you actually doom it.
Yes. This text seems to be saying that we are just constantly running around with scissors thinking we're heroes.
When really we're just interfering with spiritual processes we don't actually understand.
Exactly.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the author's underlying logic. We assume we possess this, universal perspective required to intervene in another being's existence.
But we don't.
No, we don't. The text explicitly warns against this, stating, you don't know what is good and what is bad. What you think is good may be bad. What you think is bad may be good.
It is a deeply humbling perspective. I mean, terrifying, but humbling.
For sure.
So if we can't rely on helping others, how does the text say we actually build this required state of selflessness?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the author lays out a rigorous set of internal requirements.
Okay, what are the steps?
To achieve unselfishness, one needs to repay debts and worldly ties, make what the text calls formless alms, and perfect the non-material structure of one's life.
There is a lot of jargon there. Let's break those technical concepts down, starting with formless alms. What does it actually mean to give a formless alm?
So giving a formless alm means giving without the ego ever registering the act as a gift.
Like forgetting you did it.
Kind of. If you give money to a charity and you feel a sense of pride, or if you expect gratitude, or even if you just pat yourself on the back internally.
Which we all do.
Right, which we all do. That is a formed alm. It has a shape. It feeds the ego.
So what's the formless version?
A formless alm is an act of giving that leaves absolutely no trace on your own consciousness. You give, and it immediately vanishes from your mind.
Completely devoid of attachment to the outcome.
Precisely.
Okay, and what about perfecting the non-material structure of one's life? That sounds really abstract.
Think of the non-material structure as the architectural blueprint of your consciousness.
Or like the source code of your soul.
Ooh, source code. I like that, yes. Every time you form an attachment, hold a grudge, claim ownership over a piece of property, or even define yourself by your relationship to your family.
You write a new line of code into that structure.
Exactly. And the text argues that heaven's operating system simply cannot process code burdened by earthly attachments.
So you have to strip the architecture down to its most fundamental, unburdened essence.
Yep. Which brings us to the most difficult part of this entire framework.
Let me guess. Ending worldly ties.
Ending worldly ties.
Because if you're listening to this on your commute to a job you use to pay your mortgage, support your kids, and care for your aging parents.
Which is most people.
Right. This text is essentially telling you that your very way of life, your deepest loves and responsibilities, literally disqualify you from heaven.
It's harsh. But the text is unambiguous about this. If you are entangled in worldly ties, you cannot go. If you have debts, you cannot go.
So what does this all mean? How is anyone supposed to live like this?
Well, the author doesn't shy away from the extreme friction between this philosophy and modern human existence.
I should hope not.
The text acknowledges that in a secular environment, an environment composed of money, power, class, family, and country, achieving this state is incredibly difficult.
It goes so far as to say it is almost impossible to find a selfless and egoless person in a secular environment.
Which makes total sense when you think about it.
It does. I mean, the secular world requires an ego to navigate it.
Yep.
You need an identity to open a bank account, to sign a lease, to participate in a democracy.
The author views the structures we build our lives around as fundamentally incompatible with spiritual liberation.
They are the very ties that must be severed to perfect that non-material structure.
Right.
But if the secular world is this inescapable trap of ego and attachment, what is the alternative? How does anyone actually pull this off?
The text actually proposes a highly specific solution.
Oh, there's a solution.
Yes. An environment called the second home, which was created by something the author refers to as Life Genuine.
Okay, I need to stop you there just to provide some context for the listener. What exactly is Life Genuine and the second home?
Sure.
Is it a physical place, like a commune, or is it more of a state of mind?
Well, based purely on the translated text we're examining today, Life Genuine is presented as the overarching spiritual framework or community founded by the author Deiform Buddha.
Okay, so it's a framework.
And the second home is described as a specific environment or model of living created within that framework.
Like a specialized facility for the soul.
Yeah, the author introduces it as an incubator. The text notes that while the second home is not heaven itself, it is a space designed to be close to heaven.
So it's pitched as a transitional environment.
Exactly. The text claims that if you interact with the people in this second home, and they bring you happiness, joy, freedom, and bliss,
Then what?
then you can perceive the existence of heaven through them. It acts as a controlled setting where individuals can practice severing worldly ties and cultivating those formless alms.
Away from all the entanglements of money, class, and traditional family structures that dominate the secular world.
That's the idea.
But this leads to a massive, massive question.
What's that?
What if you just don't want to do that?
Ah.
I mean, what if you look at your children, your spouse, your messy, complicated secular life, and you decide that you simply refuse to sever those ties?
Or what if you try and you just fail? Because it's hard.
Right. In a lot of traditional theologies, failing the ultimate spiritual test results in, eternal damnation, fire, and brimstone.
This raises an important question. And the text takes a surprisingly serene and honestly pragmatic approach to spiritual failure.
Pragmatic.
Yeah, there is no concept of eternal torture. Instead, the author states that if you cannot achieve unselfishness and selflessness, you simply shouldn't harbor the improper thought of going to heaven.
Improper thought. That phrasing is so interesting.
Why is that?
It implies it's less about being punished for a sin and more about just aiming for a destination your vehicle isn't equipped to reach.
That's a great way to put it. You just don't have the fuel for that trip.
So what happens to you then?
You are instructed to drop the aspiration for heaven entirely. And instead of falling into despair, the text advises that without making distinctions between true and false, good and evil, beauty and ugliness.
You should just accept the cycle of reincarnation.
Right, you just loop back around.
The text actually gets very specific about what that cycle looks like in the middle and lower realms of life.
It does.
It describes living this life as a human, the next life as a dog,
The next life is a pig.
and then the next life as a human again, just endlessly looping.
The total lack of moral judgment regarding the cycle is one of the most striking elements of the text.
Because usually, being reincarnated as a pig is seen as a punishment.
Exactly. But here, becoming a dog or a pig isn't framed as a cosmic penalty. It is simply the natural physics of a soul that has chosen to remain anchored to the physical realm.
It's just what happens.
Yeah. The author describes this path as experiencing the sweetness, bitterness, sourness, and spiciness of life.
It's a remarkably vibrant description of mortal existence,
It really is.
experiencing the joys and sorrows, the inevitability of birth, aging, sickness, and death.
Coming and going in confusion, entirely ignorant of the affairs of your past life.
And the author concludes that section by stating that choosing this cycle of reincarnation is also a good choice.
That single sentence, also a good choice, completely diffuses the anxiety of spiritual inadequacy.
Almost a relief.
It is. If you cannot detach from the people and the world you love, the universe accommodates you.
You just get to keep experiencing the confusing, deeply emotional reality of the material world in an infinite variety of forms.
It's a fascinating dichotomy.
It really is. I mean, we have traced a massive philosophical arc today on this deep dive.
We really covered a lot of ground.
We started with the text's sweeping rejection of earthly good deeds, religious rituals, and secular achievement.
Just completely wiping the spiritual scoreboard clean.
And then we examined the alternative, the singular requirement of matching the frequency of heaven through pure unselfishness and selflessness.
Regardless of your life's history or how you die.
Right. We looked at the profound friction of that requirement. The idea that our desire to save others is basically an illusion of the ego.
And that the secular world of family and career is a trap that disqualifies us from entry.
Leading to the stark choice presented by the author.
Either retreat to a specialized incubator like the second home to systematically sever your worldly ties.
Or abandon the concept of heaven entirely and embrace the chaotic, vibrant cycle of endless reincarnation.
It is a worldview that demands we completely reevaluate what we consider meaningful and what we consider a distraction.
Absolutely. But as we close this exploration, there is a profound, lingering tension at the core of this philosophy that we want you to consider.
Yeah, if achieving the ultimate state of spiritual perfection requires the complete and total severing of all attachments.
If it demands that you erase your tether to your children, your parents, your community, and your deepest passions.
Does reaching heaven ultimately require the death of human love?
Something to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.